So if everyone would bring out their handbook for new Stoics. All good, all prepared. So
yes, ma'am.
So this week, today I'm coming to you from rainy Kentucky, and Rob and Amy are coming from
sunny Sedona.
Sunny Sedona. Look at that. I love it. So we're on week 10, which is called Act the Opposite. And this was a very interesting chapter because they start by talking about how giving into your cravings can sometimes just make them come back stronger. So the Stoics are suggesting that when you mindlessly just pursue the things that you desire or your preferred outcomes, that or just avoiding what you don't like, is that it's not the best way to live your life. So in other words, it's not the best idea to only go after what you want or only avoid what you don't want. And so they talk about how getting your mind to learn how to turn what is honorable or virtuous into pleasant. To me, it feels very much just like reframing. So the things that you know are honorable or virtuous, whether or not that's your pleasure, is that when you start to view it as pleasant, like not crazy good, not crazy bad. And so they say, let us fight in the opposite fashion. Let us retreat from the objects that allure and rouse ourselves to meet the objects that attack. This is Seneca. And actually, at first, when I was reading this chapter, I actually read it a few times because I was a little confused about where they were coming from. But my favorite part that I really highlighted is we should train ourselves to not pursue the things we enjoy, but we should actively prepare to face the things we avoid. They talk about it as winter training. So even though an army would not engage enemy in the cold season, they would proactively exercise their skills and prepare. And so they say Stoic training is not just a matter of withstanding adversity when it actually comes, to prepare ourselves ahead of it during the good times. So they go on to talk about how when you only are focused on pursuing your favorite things, that you get onto a hedonic treadmill. You're just chasing after the next, like you're chasing after the next thrill. You're chasing after the next big thing. They even talk about like when you want the new iPhone and then you get it and then like you're really excited about it for a while and then that kind of fades and you're just like, okay, now I'm ready for the next big thing. So in this week, they asked us to, again, they want us to pick things that are kind of in the middle. They don't want you to pick things that are too easy. They don't want you to pick things that are like life and death. But they wanted us to first set aside some desires and aversions, or things that we really like and pursue, or things that we don't like or we avoid. And then for the week, they want us to talk about like actually doing the thing that we avoid in some way and seeing how we can kind of winter train ourselves. So I would love to hear like what you guys thought about the message first before we dive into what you did, but tell me how the message presented to you.
I liked it because it sort of brings an awareness to both what you kind of go towards, what your desires are and what your aversions are. And for me, some of the things are, the typical things that you think. So I love sugary snacks. So I knew that was one of the things I was going to have to do, is try to avoid it, at least for a day, because after dinner, for bedtime, I'm always looking for the sugar. So Monday, I was like, okay, no sugar today. Grab vegetables instead of trying to grab, a Snickers bar or something like that. So it was interesting to sort of write down and look at those kind of things and say, oh yeah, okay. So one of the other go-tos is television. So at night, you sit down and watch television. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's a comfort space for, I don't know, an hour and a half, some nights 2 hours. Just watch a show, have a few laughs, go to bed. So, when you write these things down, you get to categorize and go, And then when you look at the other side and say, what do I like to avoid? Waking up early. I like to avoid conflict. I like to avoid sometimes pushing myself, whether it be at the gym, at work sometimes. I don't necessarily go all the way out. So being able to look at those and prepare for the winter, knowing these are my winter moments, and they happen more often, I think, than I give myself credit for. But now I can recognize them and decide to take action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I from the messaging, I like that they called it winter training because, you know, for those of us or you who've watched or are familiar with Game of Thrones, you know, one of their big messages that they have from the beginning is winter is coming. Prepare for the winter. And so I immediately thought of that's like the message for pretty much, I think, the whole series. I didn't watch the whole series, but I know that was like a pretty predominant message of winter is coming, you know, get ready for it. And so it was a perfect connection to that, where just like they were, you know, preparing for that winter season, if you will, you know, through whatever they did for, you know, supplies, battle, training, etc.
Yeah. Well, it's such a great metaphor. It's like, you know, you could look at it only with rose-colored glasses and say, oh, everything is great, everything is wonderful, everything will be fine. I mean, I know, Amy, you and I have had talks about how so much self-help is focused on that, like just think positive. But in reality, when you look at it as a realist or like a Stoic or like a Buddhist, is that bad things, hard things are going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So if you imagine that you're preparing, and none of us ever know what those things are,
Mm-hmm.
but if you imagine of preparing yourself for that, it is like, you know, we should always be winter training.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, another thing too is the idea of happiness too, that ties into this too, in that, okay, so what makes you happy? And when you realize, for me, eating sugary snacks doesn't make me happy. It might increase my happiness in the moment, but over the long term, it's not sustainable. And well, they say here at some point that, let's see, you may discover about your aversions and desire more about them and want to switch up your plan. So that's why I interpreted the idea that your happiness sometimes is tied to this. So for the TV, it might be, oh, sitting down and relaxing and just enjoying yourself. And are there other ways to do that could be more productive or
Satisfying.
Yeah, more satisfying.
Yeah.
In over the long term, because these autopilot things that we think make us happy really end up being distractions.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like on page 73 is where they talk about, you know, how to, like, when you're on the hedonic treadmill, and they said, you know, realizing number one, that what is superficially pleasant, if you think back to the previous week, are things in our B group, right? If you, you know, what is superficially pleasant may not actually make you happy. It may just be, to your point, like a flicker of a sensation. It's not true happiness or fulfillment, but that also what appears to be unpleasant may not actually make you unhappy. So it's really taking that and flipping the script. The things that we don't like to do may actually, to your points, here's your point, may be more in line with our, you know, acting from a place of virtue and honorable and things like that. So they talk about that, you know, every time you successfully retreat from objects that allure you, and every time you successfully rouse yourself to meet the objects, they use the word attack you, but I would say just, you know, bug you, then you're taking a step towards wisdom and happiness. And I wrote a note I said, you know, interestingly, a lot of life already is us doing things that we don't want to do, what we term adulting, right? And it's kind of funny how we look at it that way and we say, oh, these are all the things that we don't do. But I think the problem is, you know, a slingshot, where basically we go a little too far, we overshoot over to the desires to retreat or escape from the adulting, you know, the I can't adult today kind of things. So because of that, it becomes like, it's a little bit too aggressive of a correction Whereas being able to find that balance and being able to, like we did last week, and I think over the course of the previous weeks, be able to find the fulfillment in the things that maybe we don't totally, it's not our preferred, it's our dispreferred, right? To use that term. So, do we all want to, get up and go to work every day? Some days, no. But if you can flip the script on what it is that's providing for you, like you mentioned, I think last week, then that can help you have that reframing.
Sure.
Yeah.
And every time you are, doing something that is dispreferred, and then you kind of come out the other side and you're like, okay, well, that actually wasn't that bad. Or here's how I was able to make the best of it. It's like, then each time something else comes up, you can reframe back to that and say like, well, remember that time that like, I didn't have anything sweet or watch TV and I thought I would just be bored to tears. Like, it really wasn't that bad. So something else that I might be dreading, might not actually be as bad as I may have made it in my mind to be.
Right. Yeah, I think it's Marcus Aurelius. I'm going to misquote him terribly at the moment, but he basically has a quote that says, we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. We make it worse than what it really is or was. And I think that, to your point, when we do the things that we are averse to doing and we come through the other side, unscathed or maybe just a little bit annoyed, I think that helps build up your adversity armor, if you will, builds that muscle. It's like just doing that one extra rep, you have that muscle built up so that the next time it's a lot easier. And it's just a piece of cake if you have to deal with it. And you don't assign so much negative emotion to that item. It just becomes something that you do, and may even become, like they say, it may not even be unpleasant. It may in fact actually be satisfying because of the way that you're approaching and reframing it. Back to your original point.
Or I think of the modern equivalent of, what, did you die?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. That's a good one. All right. So what were some of yours? Sierra?
So I did want to, I heard Rob say a few of the things that his are very similar, which I had arguments. So I think you phrased it as confrontation, right?
Yep.
I'm not. So it actually was important for me to see that although I usually dislike or avoid serve a purpose. And sometimes when you avoid them, you're actually avoiding a progress of some kind. So that was one that I definitely identified. Sorry, I've got a camper moving in across the way. I don't know if you can hear the motor. But the big one that was really big for me this week is I am usually have an aversion to things being unplanned, things being on the fly, things being like not figured out ahead of time. And that's a very tough aversion to have right now because it's July and our son is supposed to go back to school in 1 month. And we still don't really know if the kids are going back to school, how they're going back to school. And my old brain would have just been going completely crazy with this. And I'm having to just kind of do like all of us are, the day by day figuring out. And I'm having to learn how to let go of not this aversion of how I don't like to have things not figured out. So I wrote down for my I will, part of our exercise this week is, so instead of gripping to my plans, planning ahead, I will say to myself, go with the flow. And for me, that's a phrasing, as they put it, that gives me the warm fuzzies or warm glow, is for me to say that to myself, you just got to go with the flow. This isn't a normal time and everything's going to be okay. Just go with the flow.
Mm-hmm. What about any desires, any like cheaters, if you will, cheaters to relaxation or happiness?
Any cheat? No, I didn't write that down. Did you do that?
Well, because they wanted us to talk about, both the go-to desires as well as the things that we avoid. So did you have any desires that you
Oh,
purposely? Yeah.
A daily shower.
No.
Yeah. I
That's
really
a good
like
one.
I really like to have a daily shower, and on our so we're camping throughout our trip, and sometimes a shower is not really possible. So my cheaters is that like I'm like, okay, I don't really smell that bad. I'm okay. Little bit of fresh coated deodorant, little bit of dry shampoo, and you just move on. So that's my thing that I really like, that I had to, yeah.
But what was the so after you don't take a shower and you put your shampoo on and you put your deodorant on, how do you go about your day? Do you even think about it? You just like go out and enjoy whatever you guys are doing?
Yeah. It's like, okay, it's that's a little luxury that it's like, I'll be okay. I'll survive. I mean, lots of people go longer without a shower than this. So I mean, when we get home, will I take a daily shower?
Yes.
But I know now that I can go without it and still be okay.
So how does that translate into your son's school too? So how do you go from, okay, I needed to know that he was going to go on this date, to knowing, I don't know, it's only a month away. What are we going to do? How are you transitioning in your head when it comes to letting that plan go?
Well, I think it's very comforting knowing that that a lot of people are in the same boat. And also I have to recognize that so much of why I want to know these things ahead just has to do with me not wanting to like scramble to figure something out. So I've just kind of come to my, while I prefer to plan ahead and have things figured out in advance, I'm like, I just have to embrace the fact that, that we'll just see what happens. And if he doesn't have the right shoes for the first day of school, oh well, he'll have eventually. Or if he doesn't have, if something's not figured out right away, then
Yeah.
But great question.
Are there things that you still can do though, even though the date itself might shift? Are there things that you can still knock out ahead of time, so that way when the decision is made, the list is less? Yeah,
absolutely. So I mean, and since we're on the road now anyway, I wouldn't but it's there's certainly to planning of what you're going to need, and the things that are in our control is what we're going to do, and the things that are not, it is.
Yeah.
But the point too is these lessons that we're doing each week come out every week, and they come out in real ways, and they can be applied in real ways. So it's not just watching TV and figuring that out. It's, oh, okay, in the world we live in right now, there's big changes all the time.
Right.
There's things that we have to do differently all the time. Going out is certainly a lot different than it was 5 months ago.
Right. No, I was just gonna say, Stoicism is at its core a philosophy, but it's been called the philosophy for the real world, right? Because it's really, it's preparing you for actually living in the world. I've also heard where Stoicism, they say it's like Buddhism for the real world, because you can't just go retreat into your yurt on a mountain in the middle of Tibet and live a life of solitude. It's taking a lot, there's a lot of parallels between Buddhism and Stoicism, but the difference is Stoics are like, all right, we're in it. We're in it, we're living it, we're figuring it out. So I think that's the great thing about this philosophy, is that it is a philosophy, but it's not all just ideas or concepts. It's actually, applicable real world exercises and methods that you can apply to help you navigate the ins and outs of life. Yeah.
And,
So,
and they're actually giving you outlines of like, okay, here's the philosophy, here's how we do it, and here's some ideas about how you can actually do it. And another thing that I love about Stoicism is that it embraces the fact that all people are fallible.
yes.
You know, like we screw up and we will continue to screw up, and we're going to just continue to try to learn from it. But nowhere is there anybody saying like, why didn't you get this perfect the right time? You know?
Right, exactly. That we all struggle with our good and bad descriptions and our good and bad handles and our desires and our aversions, and it's just having the clear eyes, you know, being able to see it for what it is and to know how to best, you know, step up to and through it to deal with those things and to not make any of them become crutches for you and how you live your life. So Rob, so you mentioned sugar as one of yours. Did you have any others?
One of my other ones is I drive a tad aggressively sometimes. So one day doing this exercise, I decided that, okay, I'm just going to go with the flow. Whatever lane I'm in, I'm going to stay in that lane. And I'm not going to try to, if someone's going slower than I want, I got to get in the other lane. I got to get ahead of them. I'm like, I'm just going to see what happens. Because I've been doing a meditation to go along with these exercises. And it's based on Bruce Lee being like water. Like it was one of his big philosophies is going with the flow. Because water can flow or it can crash. So if necessary, you can crash. Most of the time, you're just flowing. So that was a fun exercise because my mind automatically went to, I need to go faster than this person. And then I was like, why? Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to go past this person? And it turned out I didn't. So I tried to have an aversion to that or aversion to my normal, you know, desire, which was kind of an interesting challenge in and of itself. But it worked out because I think I found myself the very next day. I think I did that on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I was much calmer behind the wheel because I had done that the day before.
Right. Because all of this is basically when you feel compelled to do X or when you feel compelled to avoid Y, do the opposite. Whatever the opposite is, you know, do that. So when you felt compelled to and try to weave in and out of traffic, instead you just do the opposite. Like, cool. I'm just gonna cruise along here.
Do you think that you found enough pleasure in that you may look to actually have that be a permanent change, or did it not serve you well?
In the moment, it served me fine. It's the other part of it that comes up is part of the problem is I don't leave enough wiggle room when I leave. So if I know it takes me 23 minutes to get to work, I leave 23 minutes before I got to go to work. So another way to do it would be like, okay, if it normally takes you 23 minutes to work and you drive a little faster than you should, you probably need to leave 27, 28 minutes or whatever. I'm using that as just a fake number before you need to get to work. Because then you're not as much in a rush. You're just like, all right, I'm going to allow myself 3 extra minutes. If I get there early, a couple minutes, that's okay too.
Yeah. And that's a good rational thought process of if you were going to look at making that change, okay, how can I do this without creating a problem on the other end?
Yes, not feeling rushed. Because that's another, we were talking about this actually during this week, is that how I typically do my schedules. I'm like, okay, we have a meeting. It's supposed to end at 11:30. Okay, I'll schedule my next thing at noon so that right when our meeting ends, I have to rush out of the house. And sometimes I forget things and I'm always in a rush and I always feel like I'm behind. So instead of saying, okay, I'm not going to schedule at 12, I'm going to schedule at 12:30. That way I have some wiggle room in between. So I don't have to stack everything back to back to back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amy, what about you? What did you, what aversions or desires were powerful for you this week?
Yeah, so I actually found this exercise really powerful and easily applicable just through this trigger process here. So for me, my desires or the things that I enjoy or sometimes mindlessly enjoy, truly. I wrote browsing and buying things on Amazon because it's convenient and it's immediate and I don't have to make a list and, remember to go to the store another day or whatever. I can just, if I think of it, I can go on there, add it to the cart, done. The other thing was like Rob mentioned, watching comfort TV. Sometimes if I've had like a stressful day or it's been very intensive, I like to just kind of turn on a little bit of fluff, fully recognizing what it is and trying to keep a time limit around it, but just going there as my retreat.
Yes.
And then my aversions, some of these are very timely. Preparing taxes. I hate doing the taxes. They're just like, and it's just because they're so, as we get older and as we start to diversify our lives, it's just all the papers become bigger and then there's a whole worksheet you have to fill out with my accountant and I'm just like, plus we have our businesses. It's like all of it. I hate it. It took probably, maybe 3 or 4 hours to do. And there's things that I could do, I should be doing, to better mitigate the time chunk that it takes at the time. But that was preparing taxes. The other was working out. That's a theme throughout all of our conversations, working out, getting up early, and then getting rid of clutter. And with the getting rid of clutter, it's not the actual, like, I'm not a hoarder and I don't have a problem getting rid of things. Again, it's the effort that's involved with it. And so, it's always that struggle. I think we've talked about this. It's that struggle of, do I try to sell it or do I just get rid of it? And there's a threshold there where you're like, yeah, okay, these things, sure, I can just get rid of those. But these other things, they're kind of decent money. And do I want to invest my time and effort into selling them on some platform of some sort? So those were my desires and aversions. So what I did for my opposites, the working out one was actually the most successful for me. What I ended up doing is because one of the things I really like about these lessons, and they've had us do a couple times, is they call them, implementation intentions. And I think you even talk about something similar, Siri, in your course about rituals. And when you talk about creating a habit, instead of giving yourself like a reminder or just putting something, on a to-do list, the reality is that's not going to happen. It's not going to become a true habit or ritual for you unless you tie it to something else. You tie it to some sort of trigger, and ideally a trigger that doesn't require a lot of thought, because then you'll just over time automatically just be conditioned to say, when I do X, when I do X, I'm going to do Y. So what I did for working out is I said, after every time I go to the bathroom or I fill up my water bottle, I'm going to do 50 squats and 25 push-ups. And so I started doing that, and I've started doing it consistently, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And then over time started to think about, wow, I actually ended up doing a lot of them in the course of a day because I drink a lot of water and I have to go to the bathroom a lot. So I really like that. And I kind of enjoy it now. Rob's like, what are you doing in there? Because I'm like breathing heavy after I go to the bathroom. He's like, and I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. This is my way of getting something in, above and beyond what I might do with, like a fun little workout, like a little dance workout or something.
Right.
So that was my way of trying to squeeze things in and tie it to something that has no emotional connection at all.
No.
So it just became routine.
Wouldn't it be great if it became so ingrained that like Amy and Rob are out at a restaurant and she goes into and she's in there doing her squats and her push-ups on the counter, and then the people are like, who's this?
Yeah, I haven't gone that far yet. It's mostly at home when I'm at home and this happens. Right. But you gave me an idea. I guess I could do it in the bathroom as long as it was the bigger stall and I could do the sink push-ups as opposed to the full ones.
Although right now I don't know if I want to encourage you to touch a lot of surfaces, but the idea is solid. Mm-hmm. And there's so much there's so much that you can just do with body weight, which is excellent.
Yeah.
I love that. Because I know that usually you want to exercise, but it's like actually setting the time aside. And I think so often we get tied up in, like, if you're a gym person, you think you have to go to the gym,
Right.
or you think you got to change your clothes, or you think you're going to get sweaty, you're going to have to do a shower. It's like we make it so complicated. And when you can combine it, I remember I had a friend that we would always like meet up to go out to eat or like have a drink to catch up. And we both had said, oh, we want to exercise more. So I said, you know what? We belong to the same gym at the time. And I'm like, instead of us going out to eat or going out for a drink, let's meet at the gym, get our treadmills next to each other, and we're still talking, but we're on our treadmill. I mean, it's like, how can you combine those things together and to make it a ritual, and then also just to make sure that you do it? And then perhaps the pleasure side, feeling better, starts to take over. Exactly what I think they're talking about in this week 10 is that how can you start to change your perspective or change your lens instead of viewing it like something you don't really want to do, or it's like you have to do. And now you're like, oh, it's actually pleasurable or pleasant.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
So next year you're gonna feel like a pleasant when doing taxes.
Yes.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I can. Again, if I take the time and do the preparatory work, kind of like to Sierra's point with the preparation, I started that this time because I just realized that I've always been pretty good with reconciling what, our expenses week over week, but it's just exporting out the expenses, having them categorized, getting the totals, filling in the worksheets. So it'll be a lot easier over time as I just be a little bit more proactive with that. More so with the business, not so much with the personal.
Yeah.
But the nice, and it's kind of lame because the nice thing is that our accountant, they have a portal where you can load stuff in anytime. So it's just switching it where it's like, when you get it, load it in. Don't put it in a pile and then do it all at once. It makes it easier just to get it done when it comes. So, yeah.
So when in the chapter, when we get to the end and it comes to the weekly review, did you find yourself desiring and being averse to externals a little less? What do we think, team?
I need to do a little bit more work on it, but I see the appeal of it. But it's something that you're going to have to consciously do for a while, I think, more than just a week in order to change the habit, in order to change the appeal of eating sugary snacks or driving aggressively or whatever.
Well, that's where the implementation intention is really helpful, because then it over time, it becomes less of a conscious effort, right? So if you just repeatedly, like for you, if we just hide or not have the snacks in the house, then it's not even a problem, because then you get what you get.
Right.
You have what's available to you. It's just practicing that control. But tying it to something that has no emotional connection at all allows you, I think, to then be able to separate the emotion from the act over time, to their point, and then eventually be able to find the positive in the effort, or find the or minimize the emotional attachment that you have to the thing that is pleasurable at the moment. Then it just becomes whatever.
Yeah. And I think too, in some respects, when you start to kind of apply a previous thing that we've talked about, which is taking a broader view, it's like, in this grand scheme of things, can I still find my happiness even if I don't have the preferred, or I do have the dispreferred? Can I still find and what I love is how the way they use the word pleasant. It's that it's not ecstasy and it's not agony, it's pleasant. Like, can you feel the pleasant of it? kind of back out of that. And I love how they talk about how changing our behavior can impact our emotions. So it's like, how can you balance the emotional reaction to this?
Yep.
So I found this exercise really useful.
Yeah, I did too. I really like it, and I'm going to continue to practice these implementation intentions and the associated action with it, because I think it's helpful. Like for me, I'm pretty proud of myself with Amazon. I haven't gone on Amazon because my trigger was, basically whenever I grab my phone, if I'm bored, that's what I do. I don't really go on social media, and that's my thing. I'm just like, let me scroll, see if anything interests me, and then also if I do need something, I'd go on immediately. So instead, what I did is I said, I'm gonna write it down and pick it up another time. So I'll write it down, or I did give myself a realistic or. I said, or if you're gonna do it, find the thing, don't buy it, but find the thing, add it to the cart, and put your phone away. So then, like at a later date, you will then buy all the things. You'll once a week or whatever, you'll hit the buy button.
It's that delayed gratification.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, it's less packages, better for the environment.
Yes, that's true too.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true.
Yep. So good. Sounds like it was a successful lesson yet again by our friends here,
Massimo.
And Gregory, and the Stoics.
In this chapter, it tells us that we've been focusing on both desires and aversions, but the rest of the time in this first discipline, we're just going to be focusing on desire.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be interesting to see what they throw at us next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because so often those are the things that get us tripped up the most, right?
So next week is moderate at mealtime.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they're going to talk about the after dinner sweets.
I know.
Oh, they might, Rob. It might be perfect. If you want to take it on, you can.
Your turn.
All right. That's a Rob Hunter right there.
I get it from my father.
Eating quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, again, it all just goes back to the meaning you assign to the action, right? In this case, we're talking about the meaning you assign to a meal or to food. The Epicureans versus the Stoics.
Well, another thought is, so on Instagram, one of the people who I follow I've been a longtime fan of, is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. So he does the famous cheat meal. Some people do a cheat day, some people do a cheat meal. And so essentially, like, you stick by your guns all week, and with that one day exception or one meal exception, that's when you kind of have those treats. And it always cracks me up because he posts his workouts, he posts motivational, but he also posts the cheat meal and what he's having and the cheat drinks. And I love that, it's like, I think that's some accountability too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I did see one of them. It was like a big old huge bowl of pasta. It was like this big. It was massive.
Well, he is The Rock. I mean,
yep.
he's a big man.
Yeah.
So.
He's got to burn a lot of calories. I mean, I remember years ago when Michael Phelps was in the Olympics, he talked about when he was in training, how many calories he needed just to like sustain his training. And the number just blew me out of the water. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was several thousand.
Oh, yeah.
They'd eat like 8 omelets a day or something.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's a good example, The Rock. He's definitely an example of moderation. He doesn't view it as deprivation when he can't have it, because he knows at some point he's going to have that delayed gratification, to your point.
Right. Well, and in many ways, I think maybe you appreciate that sweet or that thing even more. I mean, if you have something all the time, it's like it loses its specialness. But when it becomes something that's a treat, then you treat it as such, right?
Right. And you savor it as well.
You savor it. You taste it on the way down.
Yeah, but I mean, that's part of the challenge though, right? With being an American in 2020, even in these times, is that it's hard to turn the off switch because we don't have to.
We can get anything we want whenever we want.
You can order stuff on Amazon, it'll be there the next day. You can drive through and get food in a matter of minutes. And it's, tastes all right. Even if it's not great for you, tastes good. There's so many conveniences that we have. When we talked about this, what was it, last week, the week before? It's the inconveniences based on the conveniences that drive us crazy now. So doing these Stoic lessons in these modern times where everything is convenient can also be challenging, because when they were coming up with this philosophy, they had to cook their own food. They didn't have McDonald's and Wendy's.
They had to acquire their own food.
Well, that was it, right? So their system is based on a lot less convenience than ours is now. So there's a lot of noise that we have to turn off in order to be able to slow things down. And when you do, you realize, okay, it's okay when you slow things down.
Right. Well, and again, it all goes back to, preparing your winter training. Winter is coming, and being prepared for when, because it's not a matter of if, it's usually more a matter of when, for when an adversity presents itself. I mean, case in point, there's a reason, there's a lot of people that are like losing their minds right now over shutdowns and everything because they haven't prepared themselves.
Yeah.
And so being able to take the time to experience a little discomfort and preparing for winter will help you for when the next winter comes and you don't throw your arms up and ready to revolt.
Right.
Advice
I can't believe it.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, excellent job, everybody. Great students in training here, Stoics in training.
Us young Padawans. We always have.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, on that note then, have a wonderful rest of your week. For those of you that are watching, if you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you join our virtual book club. We do have a link in this video down below where you can sign up and join our private Facebook group where we can continue to chat about our struggles and successes on the path to becoming Stoic sages. So until next week, have a wonderful one. Be virtuous, be blessed, and find the comfort in the discomfortable.
Find the pleasant.
Find the pleasant.